for Schindler. Has a chance to write his name in Huddersfield Town legend. And he takes that chance!
What a difference a week makes. Yes, it's the warm-up episode 127. It's your host, Brady Frost. Tom Bradshaw doesn't join me this week, but I am joined by We Are Terriers, David Hartrick. Dave, how you doing? How's the new gig?
Yeah, it's going really, really well. We're very, very grateful to everybody who signed up. If you didn't know, me and Stephen Chicken have taken on doing some town coverage independently of the Examiner as Steve was made redundant and their coverage has shrunk dramatically. It's just a change across the company. It's not specific to Huddersfield. And legally, I have no opinion on that. We've kind of just started literally last week. We had our first subscribers post going up because we're charging £5 a month, which is basically the sort of the minimum we can kind of charge, because we thought we've got to charge for it because basically now we're not under the umbrella of a company. There are equipment costs and various other things that we've had to kind of take on. Now, I have freelanced for Reach and for the Examiner covering town, but I've never actually been paid for the podcast in the 3 years I've been doing it, or 4 years, or however long it is. I've never received a penny for it. So it's just for change of circumstances and everything else. It's kind of given us the chance to go forward with it. And we went with a £5 a month because it is literally like the minimum really that we can sort of, we're not, trust us, we're not going to be buying BMWs and smoking cigars off the back of it, but we were desperate to keep the coverage going because I think it's a huge hole that's left behind, by not having analysis of Steve's quality in your local newspaper. So yeah, it's been really good. We've had a big take up. It's been really, really pleasing because we had a number of subscribers that kind of in our head, we went, okay, this is where it's worthwhile doing. And in our head, we kind of thought that we'd have to kind of build that up to that over a little bit of time. And we did that on the first day. And it's been great. And we're at a point where it's kind of, we're not replacing the Examiner's coverage, to make it clear. So there's not, like 6 pieces going up every day. But what we are doing is keeping the podcast going with some specials and a few different plans in the future for that. Steve is doing his 5 conclusions after every game, which was the most popular thing he did for the Examiner by a country mile. He's also writing at least one other sort of quality analysis piece a week. He's also doing some Q&As and various other things. What he's not doing is, watching a press conference you can watch on YouTube or watch on the club's Twitter channel, to be frank, and turning it into a load of articles, just repeating what was on there. The transfer stuff in January is interesting because I think how we kind of did it before was like, all the links are out there, but if you suddenly see a scouting piece or something from Steve on the Examiner or from me when I was freelancing there was a reason for that. That was because we believed it was going to happen. And we're kind of the viewpoint that we're going to just keep doing that. There's no point us doing transfer news and reporting transfer news, leave that to your Football League world or what have you. But if we suddenly do a scouting report on a player, that's because we are pretty sure something's going to happen. And we still have those links with the club. And it's important to say the club has been absolutely brilliant and want to support us and want to keep going because they want a sort of an authoritative voice in the media out there that not only sort of holds them to account when needs be, but speaks for them when it's difficult for football clubs to sort of have any sort of hold in the media landscape at the moment. So it's just as important for them to have us independently of them, but reporting on things for them, getting things out there. There was a reason we started with a Kevin Nagel interview because he wants to support us. He wants us to continue to be an authoritative voice. So yeah, it's been great. It's been great. Really, really brilliant take up. Really mind blowing take up. The first podcast went up today. There's 5 conclusions up there already. I've written a piece that's going up this week, just explaining a bit of a glossary of terms, but in Huddersfield Town flavours. And there's sort of all sorts planned going ahead. And like because of the take up we've had, for example, we're hoping. At one point we thought we weren't going to be able to do away games realistically because of the cost involved, because when we're not working on other things, it's very difficult to justify going to an away game in London or going to somewhere else. But there is a chance, it's not for definite, but there is a chance we're going to be able to do some away games, which does make a difference rather than just watching it, on streams. It does make a difference to watch the game in terms of an analysis point of view. And yeah, it's been great. It's been really, really great, really kind of heartwarming, because we both had loads of really nice messages, but you never know if nice messages are actually going to turn into people signing up and people listening and people subscribing. And so far it has. So yeah, it's great. I better mention the where you can actually go to sign up, hadn't I, as we're plugging it, which is We Are Terriers, which is all one .substack.com. And all you do is it takes you to a little landing page where you just put your email in. It gives you the option to subscribe, and how you want to pay the £5. I think there's an annual option, so you can pay 12 months worth, or you can do it monthly. And there's even an option to pay more than £5. And believe it or not, we've had quite a few people who've paid more than that, which is mind blowing to me, to be honest, mind blowing. So thank you very much to everyone who's subscribed so far, and thank you to everyone who will subscribe after this podcast goes out to your millions of listeners, Brady.
That's 100% right. Millions of listeners. And we will include the link in the episode description, so you can just click on it there. Nice and convenient for you. Cool. Right. Let's get into this Bristol City game preview. But before we do, he says, as you know, this year we've sponsored Huddersfield Town Women captain Beth Stanfield. So it's time for one of our monthly updates. Beth is actually out injured at the moment. So she kind of asked Beth Ibbotson, one of the other players, to speak to us and give us an update on Town's recent results. Beth has been captaining the side in a few games in her absence. So here's that clip to let us know how they've been getting on.
Hiya, thank you for having me again. It's great to be back on the podcast. It's been a busy month or so with games, which started with Newcastle on the 22nd of October. We prepared really well for this game. Glenn set out a game plan which we as players batted into, but within the first few minutes this was affected by going down to 10 men, which put us on the back foot. We were defeated 4-0, but I was really proud of the team performance, as we all worked as a team and every single player worked their socks off. Overall, the scoreline definitely didn't reflect the game itself. We defended incredibly well considering, and we had multiple attacking opportunities ourselves, which could have led to a couple of goals. So considering the circumstances, we walked away with some level of positivity from this game. The following week, we had an important League Cup game against West Brom, where we won 4-3. This was a personal achievement for myself, as I captained the side, which was a proud moment. But more importantly, the performance filled us with confidence. It was a game that Glenn encouraged the players to enjoy and show what we could do, as there was less pressure, it not being a league game. And I believe that actually brought out the best in us, as we played some good football, playing out from the back, linking up and combining to break through the lines. We had a wobble the last 20 minutes, but saw the game out. So as a whole, we controlled the game and took our chances in front of goal. We then went into the league game the following week full of positivity against Liverpool Feds, which showed when we scored within the first 20 minutes. However, after this, we were filled with frustration from a few referee decisions, which ended up in us being 2-1 down at half-time. I think we were hard done by, but looking at ourselves, we didn't do enough after scoring first. We were second to each ball and weren't playing to our identity. After a half-time team talk and some changes, we pushed for an equaliser, dominating the second half, and should have capitalised on the amount of possession and chances we had. They threatened with counter-attacks with their fast forwards, which punished us in the last minute when they scored another to win the game 3-1. This loss hurt, as I think we knew we could have done better and should have done. We struggled to convert our chances and didn't respond well to the situation we were put in. Another tough game followed with Burnley away in the FA Cup first round on the 12th of November. Credit goes to Glenn and the coaching staff for the level of detailed analysis and preparation for this game, which we as players implemented really well throughout. We started slow considering early on, but showed great character to score an equaliser. From this point, I believe we're the better team. We pressed high, created many chances and had a great mentality, which I don't think the opposition expected of us. We didn't let them play their football. They obviously had very dangerous players, so they always carried a threat, but the belief was there from us all that we were going to be the team to nick a goal and win the game. But unfortunately, football is full of mistakes and we conceded a poor goal. We were left heartbroken at the end of the match, losing 2-1 in that manner, as every single player was outstanding, but it goes to show how not taking advantage of dominant periods in football can really punish you. Overall, it was a huge turning point for the team, as it was a performance to be proud of and something we can take into the coming league games, having competed with the top of the league. Off the back of a very good performance, we took this into our County Cup game, where we progressed to the next round. Credit goes to Penistone Church. They showed great perseverance the whole game and were a credit to themselves and their club. For us, it was about implementing attacking patterns and principles to be transferred into future games. The performance was a professional one, which brings us closer to our goal of getting to the final. There's a lot to work on, which we've been working on in training, preparing for our next games, whenever the weather allows it, of course.
Okay, right, let's talk about the Bristol City game then, and thanks to Beth for that earlier. So the Terriers, they host Bristol City this Saturday after picking up 5 points in their last 3 matches. The Robins travel to the John Smiths, having lost 2 on the bounce and haven't won in their last 4 away trips. Can Town make it 4 games unbeaten? David Hartrick, that's the question I ask you straight away.
They can. I think it's an eminently winnable game, with some caveats in there. I think they're an odd side, Bristol. They're an odd side. Have you looked into them much, Brady?
Yeah, well, interesting. Yeah, I had a quick look, and obviously Liam Mann's only come in, but they're all like quite 1-goal margin, quite tight, like not loads in it. So it's kind of hard to when we do these pods, they're a bit of a weird one to look at. They're very like middle of the road, I'd say.
Yeah, that's it. They've kind of lost to Leicester, Leeds, and Southampton by 1 goal, I think, and they've won all but 1 game by 1 goal. And the game they won, I think, was it Rotherham or Plymouth? I can't remember. It was either Rotherham or Plymouth. I think they beat 4-1. So they are a side that keep things tight, but they're also a side that when you look at them, they have loads of names that you know. They've got there are loads of names that you hear and you instinctively think, okay, I'm pretty sure they've been knocking around the Championship for years and they're good. And what I mean is names like Kai Naismith and Harry Cornick and Matty James and Rob Dickey, and there are others as well. And they kind of never, I don't think they ever really become more than the sum of their parts, really. They're difficult to beat and difficult to break down, but they're also kind of, this isn't a fortress. I think you can get at them. I think Rob Dickey is a very limited footballer, shall we say. So you can play around him a bit. And yeah, I don't see any reason why, if Town are kind of sensible and kind of organised well and do the things that they do well, there's no reason why they can't get something from this game. And I think they'll more than likely be kind of buzzing after the last week, even though they conceded that goal late against Swansea. I don't think anybody thought 5 points was coming from those 3 games. So, yeah, I do. My gut feeling is at the moment, I think draw, because I think every Huddersfield Town game draw, because injuries, no Radoni, don't score enough goals, etc., etc. But yeah, they could get a bit more out of it.
Yeah, and it was interesting coming into this. I was looking at what Bristol's results have been playing teams like near the bottom, and the 3 below. Obviously, they drew QPR away. They beat 10-man Sheffield Wednesday at home, but that was a bit of a laboured one, and they needed a last-minute winner to beat Rotherham away. So, like you say, it's kind of, you look at that, and yes, they've got 2 wins from the bottom 3, but they're not as kind of solid. It's not like a 2-0 kind of we were better than them kind of. So it is an interesting one, and I agree. I think this is, you look at the week Town have had, and it's been very good, but also probably very needed because QPR, Sheffield Wednesday, they've had a good week compared to what they've produced this season. So yeah, this looks weirdly more like a winnable one, I'd say, but I'm kind of with you. It's just I was very surprised Town scored 2 against Sunderland. I don't think many people were predicting us to win against Sunderland. I mean, Tony Mowbray said it himself after the game, but I just Town don't really look like they score 2. I just feel like they have 1 goal in them, and it's as you've talked about on your pod and we've talked about on here, it's very laboured at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I think the thing is that with Bristol, they're quite like Town in some respects. They don't concede as many as Town have, but Town kind of don't concede as many as the table says. Really, they've just had a couple of real off days that have completely ruined the goal difference. And I think Bristol have only scored like 2 more than Town across the season. And there's no doubting they've got more firepower. Harry Cornick is a sort of proper championship stalwart. One of Danny Cowley's favourite players, Harry Cornick, actually. And of course, Naki Wells is still there, but they kind of just don't. They have quite similar problems to Town in attack, really, in that they don't ever really generate enough chances to sort of properly kill teams off. And I think at the moment, if you look at Town's week, they get a goal against Southampton that's a cross that goes in. They get a winner against Sunderland where it's a sort of the ball kind of ends up at Bergsorg's feet, kind of by accident, and he finishes it first time really, really well. Then they get the own goal. It does kind of feel like they're getting a slight bounce of the ball at the minute, and you hope it continues, really, because if it does, as I said, there's no reason they can't beat a Bristol, and there's no reason you can't go into it thinking, okay, well, we shouldn't be losing this, put it that way. But it depends if they. I think the week off will do them a world of good. They looked extremely tired against Swansea. If you play all that time without the ball, then you are going to be tired. And like the team, the average age of the team was nearly 29 years old against Swansea. They need some recovery time. And I think these are the games where they have a week to recover from their last fixture. It's a home game. These are the ones they've kind of got to target before January to try and get something out of it. And I wouldn't say there's massive pressure because they've just got, I would argue, 5 more points than many people thought out of that week. But at the same time, I spoke about it in the podcast, the bar has slightly moved at this point because we've seen that they can get something out of these games. So they can't hull away it. They've got to be more proactive. They've got to actually go out and try and win this game. And I think as Town fans, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but what you want to see win, lose or draw is a team that are trying to win a game. And I think that the personnel they've got are not ideal at the moment, but I think they've proved they are trying to find ways to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And we've touched on this before quite a few times, and I know you have as well, but particularly after a 3-game week, like you barely have any time on the training ground. It's just recovery, play a game, recovery. So I'm kind of with you. A little bit of a break will do them good because, I mean, I'm a bit worried about people getting run into the ground. You both touched on Sorba Thomas. That's a concern for me because he's putting in a real shift for Darren Moore and the team, and he looked knackered. I think they all just look a bit knackered, like you say. So I think a rest could do him really good in this one.
Yeah, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. And I think Bristol are quite they're not going to come at them all blood and thunder. They're not just going to throw the kitchen sink at them. They're going to try and work their way into the game and try and gradually sort of push home their superiority. So I don't think Town have to worry about like withstanding a huge barrage. But I also think this isn't a game to come away with 22% possession. This is a game. I'm not saying that Town suddenly have to have to come, they have to have 60% possession, anything like that. But you can do more on the ball against Bristol, and it would be nice to see them sort of make some moves that way.
Yeah, definitely. You want like an Ipswich Town, like slightly different, but they went at them, didn't they, and gave a good account of themselves. So no, I'm with you there 100%. Now, listeners, if you were tuning in, you may have seen that Tom, or heard, if you just listen on the pods, that Tom isn't here, but panic not, he did do a history corner, and here it is.
Hello, it's me, it's Tom. That means it's History Corner. It's Huddersfield Town versus Bristol City. 66 times these teams have faced off with each other. Town edge it with 28 victories, 13 draws and 25 defeats to the Robins. The first game was as far back as 1911, where Town lost 3-2 away to Bristol City in the second tier. And then the most recent game was also in the second tier, where Town drew 0-0 last season under Neil Warnock as the tide began to turn for Town's hunt for survival. There's been 2 6-1 victories in this fixture, both sides picking up one. Towns was in 1959 and then the Robins was in 1989. The highest scoring game, though, wasn't one of the 6-1s, and it came in 1915, where Town were on the right side of an 8-goal thriller, winning 5-3 that season. Ralph Shields with a hat-trick that day, and Town's top scorer that season, where Town finished a respectable 8th in Division 2. Now we go into players that have played for both, and especially recently, in recent history, it's been a very striker-heavy selection this. So we've got some brilliant names to throw out here. Obviously, most recently, the lovely Naki Wells has played for both sides. John Stead had a stint at Bristol City, and then obviously Marcus Stewart, the legend that is, played for both Bristol clubs. One of my favourite players to play for both teams, and with possibly one of the greatest goal announcements you'll ever hear down at the Sir John Smith Stadium, was Jamie Boom Boom McComb. What a legend he was. And then finally, Alan Walsh, who was one of Bristol City's best ever players, I believe. Got a couple of Player of the Season awards whilst there. Made over 200 appearances for them. And only went on to make 4 appearances for Town in 1991. And that is your History Corner this week. Up the Town. Let's get a win on Saturday. Come on, you mighty Terriers.
Okay, so thanks to Tom for that. Players play for both. Marcus Stewart, obvious one. Jack Hunt was the one I remembered, who is obviously really well loved by Huddersfield Town fans still. So there we go. So going back to Bristol a little bit, Dave, I was asking you before, and I think it's very before we were recording. I think it's very telling that you were kind of didn't really know what to say, and we were going to talk about it on here. Bristol have replaced Nigel Pearson with Liam Manning. Obviously, he was linked to Huddersfield. I think it was a few years ago. I mean, what coach hasn't been linked with Huddersfield, given how many managerial changes we've made? But I wanted to ask what your thoughts on him are as a coach. I'm not expecting you to be a Liam Manning expert, but just curious for your take.
I think he's quite interesting, but I still kind of don't have a firm opinion of whether he's good or not. What I mean about interesting is he was a youth coach at West Ham, and then he was running their sort of B team, and then he made the move to go to the City Group and to become like essentially Lee Bromby's first job, like academy director. And then he got pulled out of that to go to a club in the Belgium second division, which are really like that move is not a move you can feasibly see coming. So he obviously had a sort of a motivation to get the top job. He wanted to be a manager, and he did really, really well with them. I think he took over when they were like I don't know if they were bottom, but they were not far off. And he ended up, I think they ended up top 4 or 5. And the problem is it's the Belgium second division. And as an analyst, I cannot sit here and tell you how much of an achievement that is, because I just don't know. I don't know what the level is like, if it's comparable with League Two, or is it comparable with the Championship, or is it non-league? Because remember, you have to understand that second tiers in European football are not like the Championship. England is a massive anomaly, for the quality of our football through the tiers. But then MK Dons took the chance on him, and he had a really quite a weird time there, in that for a spell it looked quite good, and then dramatically it went south and went wrong. And again, if you look at what's happened since at MK Dons and a little bit into how the club is being run, I don't know if that's Liam Manning or if that's the club. I genuinely don't. So I've kind of got a question mark. And he went to Oxford, and there was no denying he did well at Oxford. And he was doing some quite interesting things tactically, and he's a little bit of a disciple of the sort of Pep Guardiola passing football that is sort of gently leeching its way down the leagues. And he's like a sort of a Wagner high line and high press, but with a sort of Carlos Corberán emphasis on control and possession, really. So he's not there yet by any stretch with Bristol, by any stretch. And again, it's like, I just don't know if he's good or if he's not. I think there are signs that there is something there, but on the other hand, there are also signs of, I don't know about that Belgium job. The MK Dons job, I don't know how much of that was his fault. Oxford United have actually got a really good League One squad, I would argue. There's a couple of players in there who could jump up immediately into the Championship. Again, I'm not trying to downplay his talent. So I'm trying to say, I genuinely don't know. I genuinely don't know how good he is. I think we'll probably kind of know more next season, really, if he stays that long, because I don't think he's had a club where he's had his own set of players, where he's gone through 2 transfer windows, so you can sort of feasibly say, okay, this is now my team. I've recruited into this team. I've got the first 11 that I want to play my sort of football. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and I still think he's kind of feeling his way a little bit with Bristol. Like you say, their form is kind of all over the place at the moment. But often when you're trying to switch to a new style, when you're trying to evolve, this does happen. Let's all look at Carlos Corberán's first season with Huddersfield Town to see how long it takes to kind of change a mindset within a squad. So I think you have to give him a bit of grace for that. But then also you have to say, okay, well, now's the time to play them. Because if they're going to evolve into something much better, beat them now. So yeah, I don't know. He's an interesting manager. He's kind of one to keep an eye on. And I'm kind of convinced in 3 years' time, he's either going to be managing in the Premier League or he's going to be managing in League Two. It's going to go one way or the other, really.
Yeah. I mean, I'd give my judgment, but like you say, I think Oxford are quite a good run club. I know he did well there, but arguably, I think they're kind of a Championship team. That playoff final where Wickham just basically put 10 men behind the ball, as Wickham did under Gareth Ainsworth, and fluked that. It's hard to judge. And what do I know? Because I said Danny Cowley, I thought he'd be a Premier League manager, and he's.
Well, I think the thing is, right, not to go off on too big a tangent, but I think with Danny, I think what he did with Huddersfield Town gets massively downplayed, because
I agree.
I think people forget the situation they were in when he took over, and then he had to manage the COVID break as well. And then he had to manage through that last period of games played in the weirdest circumstances. Because when you need points at home, what you want is your crowd behind you and really pushing you forward. And they kind of had to grind it out. And I'll never forget that West Brom performance where he broke it down into 4 quarters. He basically did his usual and got somebody to sort of go down on the minute for a drinks break, so he could basically reshuffle them, put Smith Rowe on with 20 minutes to go right into that 10 space and got their reward for it with like 5 minutes to go. And I think with Danny, it's quite interesting because I think there were lots of reasons to take that Portsmouth job, but there was also equally lots of kind of red flags around it as well. And he kind of didn't get the backing he needed there, that subsequently they have now realised, okay, we actually need to do this. And I feel with Danny that his next job is going to be really interesting, because I'm like you, I'm actually a big fan. You know, I am a big fan, but he kind of needs a club that turns itself over to Danny Cowley. That's the problem. So if you were to say, like, is he going to be a Premier League manager? He's never going to be a Premier League manager, because a Premier League team just won't do that. You know, they won't sort of say, right, you can handle some recruitment, you can change how we do our academy setup, you can have it completely in your own image. But do I think he's probably going to be a very successful lower league manager again? Yeah, absolutely, I do. And I think if he'd have took that Bradford job, he'd have got them promoted.
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't. I mean, I think, sorry, we are digressing here, but just on the Cowley, I remember it was a few months ago, and like people always shared the team against West Brom, and it's like, oh, look, we had Trevor Chalobah, like Smith Rowe, like blah blah, like, and we only did this. It's like, again, no team had stayed up at the point when they came in, and also like they're not the players that Trevor Chalobah and Emile Smith Rowe are now.
No.
You know, don't need to tell you that. So yeah, no, I think, you know, clearly Carlos ended up doing a better job in the long term. But yeah, like I think he gets you know, talked off. Yeah, kind of he's underrated a little bit, I think, after all that.
Yeah,
anyway.
Also, while we are on this tangent,
let's do it. I want an hour of this.
But also, the thing that gets thrown around is like, oh, his football was really, really bad. People forget before the Leeds game, which was the last game before the COVID break, and that Leeds side, like it or not, is genuinely in like the top 2 or 3 championship sides of all time.
Oh yeah.
Now I know lots of people listening to this will completely bristle at that. I completely understand that, but it is the truth. They were, and before that, they just chucked in performances, couple of performances. I think was it Charlton and Bristol, but I think it might have been Bristol. I can't remember.
Yeah,
where the XG was absolutely off the charts, nearly 4. You know, and they had taken them apart. The problem was, like, that COVID break could not have come at a worse time, because it just completely like took the wind out of everyone's sails. And then I think we really are on a tangent. This is Bristol City preview here. But the other thing was about the Cowleys is that they really struggled to adjust at first in the COVID grounds, because I obviously did all the town games, and when there's no one in there, what you don't realise is that everything you can say could be heard by everything else. So when you turn around and have a go at a player, some players get really bristly about it and bullish and pull their socks up and they go, right, I'm going to show you. But there are other players who everybody's just heard you getting a roasting for something and they just shrink into their shells. And I think the Cowleys, more than anyone else I saw, really kind of struggled that with the first 2 or 3 games. And you had 1 or 2 quite sensitive souls in that Huddersfield Town 11 who basically didn't like everybody being able to hear them being told off, to put it in the simplest terms. And they kind of had to really adjust for that. So it was, God, it seems that COVID time was just so weird on so many levels. Anyway, Bristol.
So we're saying we're going on tangents here. This is kind of a tangent because it's Quana's question time. So ahead of the previous show, we wanted to know, this is actually quite topical for a Quana's question, I will say. The question we asked you all, and I'll ask Dave for his thoughts, and you'll hear the thoughts of myself, was have recent results changed your mind about Darren Moore? So here's what the listeners have to say, some of the responses. So Michael said, got to give him a transfer window. I can understand why he's doing what he's doing, but he needs the quality. Liam Noble says, nope, he still needs time because of when he came in and what he came into. Been massively unlucky with injuries to players, not even being able to fill a bench. That has then been compounded further by playing 2 fixtures in a week. Brackets, Warnock didn't have this issue, so has to rotate anyway. Will Harris says, I would have said no until I saw this. And if people saw the tweet, it's the Arteta one where Arsenal stuck by him after he'd won, I think it was 2 games in 10. And Will says, I get why they made the change. Players wouldn't have come in January knowing Warnock was leaving in the summer or before. I wouldn't have chosen Moore personally, but he's here, so we need to get behind him. And Rob, a bit of a contrast, he says, I'm not so sure how much the recent run has been down to Darren Moore as much as the squad selection being dictated by injuries and him getting a bit of luck. I'm worried about how much say he'll get in the transfer window if we recruit for his style and then part ways with him in February. So yeah, a little bit split. There was a little bit split in the comments. I think my take on it is not really changed my mind about Darren Moore. I think, we've touched on it on here and you guys have touched on it on yours. It's just really hard to judge with the squad where it is. And I know everyone loved Neil Warnock, and it's not to criticise Neil Warnock, but I just think like Neil Warnock says comments to make himself look good. So like the playoff thing, I know it's been talked about to death, but there's no way this team was going on a playoff push. Warnock's just saying that, so when it doesn't do well, he can be like, oh, well, I would have taken them to playoffs. He did that with Middlesbrough, because I know as soon as Warnock left, Johnny from the Middlesbrough podcast was saying, oh, this all sounds a bit familiar. Yeah, I think it's really hard to judge, and, it gets talked about a lot, but the January transfer window, I do think, I think you actually said it, Dave, on the your pod this week, but it is kind of like, I think that's Town's season in a nutshell. They need to nail that window, and I think he deserves it because, yeah, he's not. He's been working with a squad that we all have said is quite threadbare and lacks quality. And in my opinion, I don't think it's even an opinion, the injuries we've had have made it a worse squad than what Neil Warnock had. So I've not really changed my mind about it. I just think it's really hard to judge Darren Moore, and I think really I'm just pleased he's had a good week, because I feel like some of the criticism has been a bit unfair in my opinion. But Dave, what about yourself?
My opinion hasn't really changed, which is that I think it's very, very difficult to judge him so far. When he came in, I think he came into like not an impossible situation, but replacing Warnock at Huddersfield Town was always going to be really, really difficult. Doesn't matter who had come in, they would have faced the exact same challenges in terms of PR and everything else. And I think he's kind of straight batted everything, which hasn't endeared him, because he doesn't give a good press conference. He doesn't make jokes. He doesn't, he's not making people smile. But you have to remember that in the nicest possible sense, Neil Warnock didn't care when he was here. He didn't care, because he knew he could do no wrong in terms of the fans. He knew last season it was a free hit. Keep them up and you're a legend forever. If you don't keep them up, not my fault. It was the people that came before me. This season, he knew he was never staying. Don't let anybody tell you he was going to be here at the end of the season. We all knew he wasn't staying. So it was a horrible situation to come into. And I think he has been unlucky, but I think also he's had to turn the training up a little bit. And of course, that does lead to some muscle injuries. And I think playing without the ball, as they've been forced to do, doesn't help that in any respect whatsoever. So it's just kind of all the cards feel like they're stacked against him at the moment. And I'm not sitting here as the world's biggest Darren Moore fan. I kind of don't know. Majury's out for me. I look back at his managerial career and I see lots of really, really good things, and some things I look at and I think, yeah, I don't know, and you speak to fans of clubs who've had Darren Moore as a manager and they're sort of largely positive, but they've always got like a but, but he did this, or but we couldn't go up because of this. So I think the jury's still out a bit, but at the moment, I just don't think you can judge him. That's the long and short of it. I think until they get to January and he's got some personnel back and he's got the kind of the transfer business that they should have done in the summer and couldn't, because they still need a striker, they still need an 8, they still need a winger, they still need a right back. Now, right back, I think is fourth of those things now because of the way Ben Jackson's playing and Ollie Turton's coming up and Pearson can play there. But they're the roles there to fill in the summer. Never mind now. The fact they haven't done that and he's kind of inherited it, I just think, we've just got to wait and see, really. But I do think the season lives or dies, really, by what the squad looks like on February the 2nd. And I think far more than lives or dies than whether Darren Moore's in the dugout or not. I genuinely do, because Neil Warnock only had 8 points from 8 games. That's the kind of reality. A lot of people are sort of saying, Warnock could be flying now or he'd have a load of points from it. He had 8 points from 8 games. And I think Darren Moore is on 12 points from 11 now overall. So they're tracking pretty much exactly the same, and that tells me that what's going to shift that needle isn't the dugout. It's on the pitch. They need some more quality on the pitch. So it hasn't changed my opinion, really, because I don't think it's really possible to have a really, really strong opinion. Because I think if you're blaming Darren Moore, then you're kind of not looking at problems elsewhere. And there are reasons for that. We're all football fans. I have huge blind spots when it comes to Brighton and Hove Albion, believe me. We all have them when you're a fan, and that's absolutely fine and legitimate. But I just think as an analyst who talks about Huddersfield Town a hell of a lot with a hell of a lot of different people, I just think put Liam Manning in there, put, I don't know, Alan Pardew in there, and they've got the exact same problems Darren Moore has at the moment. So let's see. The one thing I would say, without going off on a different tangent again, but I do think Town are only like 2 or 3 players away. They do lots of good things. They just don't have that creative spark. And if they had that creative spark, so they can turn some of the half chances into proper chances, and they've got a striker who's a little bit more of a finisher, I genuinely think they'll be absolutely fine. If they get that recruitment right, I don't think they're going to finish 21st. I think they'll probably finish like 14th, 15th, 16th. That's genuinely how comfortable I think it could be. But, the question is they've got to get that recruitment right.
Yeah, and we got some questions about January, which we'll come on to. But I am kind of with you. I think it's kind of, I think if you have that quality, that's the thing, isn't it? Like if you've got 2 real quality options, like you said, that passing 8 and that striker, I actually think it lifts everyone else. Like Bergzog is a classic. I know people are a bit, a bit torn on him because he's a classic, does something excellent and then goes anonymous for free. But I almost think like if you don't have to rely on him to do the amazing thing in free, like it might raise him up. And Radoni, I think he's been excellent this season. I know you've talked about it. We've talked about it on here, but Town could really do with him back. And again, even I think Ben Wiles, if he has someone else, he's probably been playing with an injury. That's kind of what everyone's saying, but not saying. And I just think it lifts the team as well. I'm completely with you.
They need that 8 for me is the key position, because I just don't think they've got. It's not like we're waiting for Ben Wiles to become that player. They just haven't got that player in the squad. And there are games where they need somebody to pick that pass. Like at the moment, there's so much reliance on kind of Sorba to as the outman to kind of make something happen. And you have to remember he's always got 2 people to beat. That's his life. He's always got 2 people to beat before he can make anything happen. That I think if they've got a proper passer who can find other people and take some of the responsibility off, and then a striker who, ultimately is sort of I wouldn't say a better finisher than Danny Ward, but maybe a more selfish player than Danny Ward, to be frank, then I do think they can get a lot more out of it. There's been a lot of games this season that have passed Town by because they've kind of given up when they've realised they've sort of got no way to unlock the door. And suddenly, if you've got a player who can do that, it kind of changes your fortunes. I'm gonna say the 2 words that everybody wants to hear, and that's Aaron Moy. If if Aaron Moy is not in that side in 2017, I don't think Town go up. I think it's that dramatic a difference. So, if they can find that player who just makes a bit of a difference in that midfield and eases a little bit of pressure on others, and allows Jack Redoney to just run into those pockets of space and be picked out by passes instead of trying to have to go hunting for the ball all the time. I just don't think they're a million miles off. I really, really don't. But to reiterate, they've got to get the right players in. They've got to get that recruitment right.
We'll come on to that actually, because that's the question we kind of did on a poll on X. But before we do, we'll just take a little quick break. So if, like me, you're going to the game this weekend, you normally go to, because I'm at the Kilnabank side, go to the little Magic Rock bar, get yourself there. But you can't wait until then. Don't forget, if you listen to this podcast, Magic Rock are our sponsors, and for doing so, you get 10% off all online orders just using the code AHTT10 at magicrockbrewing.co.com. So there you go. There's a little ticker for you on there. Right, we'll come back and we'll talk about that poll I was mentioning about just then. Okay, so the poll we did on Twitter was ahead of this game. We wanted to know on We Are Terriers. There was an exclusive with Kevin Nagle and Stephen Chicken. And Kevin Nagle said in this that Huddersfield are going to be, quote, active in January looking for the right players. So we wanted to know, are you confident Town will get the right players in the next transfer window? So it's just a little quick poll. 19% said, yes, I am confident. 31% said, I'm torn. 48% said, I'm not confident. Dave, not surprising, because as I joked, Town are quite pessimistic. And I think just my thoughts on this quickly. I get it, because I think we've had years of... just wait until this window. I'll just wait until this window. Oh, things will get better. Things will get better. I think we've had a lot of words, with previous ownership, and this is really a season where I think the mismanagement is kind of, and the lack of good recruitment for the squad is really kind of stark.
I agree.
So I don't think it's this isn't necessarily a criticism of Kevin Nagle, but I think we've just heard this all before, and I think this is the time that we do need to see it. And I think you touched on it actually, but they do need that window that is a bit like we were talking about the Cowleys, that January window. They need those quality additions that are going to take it up. So I'm not surprised that people aren't confident. I think we do just have to wait and see. But how are you? Are you confident Town will get the right players?
No, but that doesn't mean they won't. The reason I'm saying no is not because it's based on history or anything like that, but like I'm an analyst, so I have to look at evidence. And at the moment, the team's all new. We don't know what a Mark Cartwright window looks like properly, because the summer was weird. It was weird on lots of levels, and it was kind of out of Town's control. And I'm not going to go into it, but really there was lots of reasons why they didn't recruit very well. So I don't really have an opinion at the moment, because I've sort of kind of yet to see what they can do. I think when you look at Mark Cartwright's history recruitment wise, I think there's some very promising things in there, and I think there are some that you look at and you go, oof. But I think that's probably true of anyone. You can hold up Lee Bromby and say, this is the man that created that side for Carlos Corberán and got those people in on a free, and it was what a season it was. But then I think people look at the following windows and they blame him for everything as well, and that kind of becomes more important than the good team you create. So I just don't know. I'm kind of confident in that. I think I know some of the names they were talking about in the summer, and they were potentially good signings. There was a couple of strikers they were after that ultimately didn't come for reasons that are not all in the club's control, as I said, but they were the right kind of players. They were the right kind of signings. So I feel kind of encouraged on that front for some of the names I know they were looking at. but you've got to get them over the line. You know, names on a list are fantastic. You can have Kylian Mbappe, Lionel Messi, and Lewis Dunk on a list, but it doesn't mean you're going to get the 3 best players in the world, does it? But yeah, I kind of be wary of anyone who sort of says they're definitely not going to get it right and it's going to be a disaster. And I'd be kind of wary of anybody that says they're definitely going to get it right and it will be a huge success, because we just don't know at the minute. But I think probably when they've made a couple of signings, we'll probably know the direction of travel. You know, I think the first one is quite an interesting one to get done, because there is a world in which, I don't know, Kevin Nagel wants to be a bit splashy and go and spend a few quid on someone and have a big PR win. It may be a couple of Premier League loans before anything else. Who knows, really? Who knows? I just don't know what he's going to look like at all. So it's a bit of a non-answer, but at least I'm explaining my non-answer.
No, I'm with you. Like, I don't think you can say either way, can you? Because as we both kind of touched on that, like, everyone's new and also like new regime, and yeah, it's hard to say. I think the encouraging thing for me, though, if I'm going to be slightly positive, is I feel like Darren Moore's got a reputation of like having good loan contacts, and like he's well thought of in the game, and that's no disrespect to Neil, but you know, Neil is rightly or wrongly attributed with playing a certain way, and you know, he's a very results now manager, and results now managers don't necessarily want young players on loan to make mistakes when, you know, games are so costly. So I feel like that's something that's maybe a tick in Moore's column. He does have those contacts, so hopefully we see that. And we've seen with Town, you know, I know Town are never going to be a side that can pay millions and millions for players, or historically hasn't been. But like, I think where Town have done well, and we've seen, you know, with Carlos Corberan teams, with the Fagner teams, like if you get your Premier League loans right, that can be a real difference maker. You know, if we, for example, I know it's the one last season, but like if Tino Andrin could have stayed fit, you know, that could have made a real difference. It's one of them you can really look out. So yeah, we'll wait and see. But I think there's like we've kind of touched on, I think there's a bit of surgery, and you touched about on the age and the old. I want to see, ideally, I want to see some young players and not some young Brahima Diarra. He's played in the academy. Ideally, if I could ask for, I'd want some young players who have got a bit of potential but have like 50 career appearances in League One or League Two to the name. Ideally, I think that's the kind of players we need.
Yeah, I agree. I as I said, I have no prior knowledge. I don't know which way they're going to go with it. But you look at the Premier League loans that Town have had in very recent history, and they've made a big difference. You know, Levi Colwell, what a player! You know, future England captain, that lad. Emile Smith-Rowe, Trevor Chalobah, like you said, Tino Andrin. He did get that injury, but you've got to remember that he had a couple of really big contributions in a couple of games as well, you know, at key times. So they've traditionally worked that system really, really well, and they couldn't over the summer. And I would humbly suggest that there would be nothing wrong with the first couple of signings being Premier League loans till the end of the season. And I don't think I'm a bit with you. I think that the time is. I don't want to see them sign on a permanent another project player, because they still have plenty of project players technically on the books that the projects have either stalled or are ongoing, or you know, the end goal has changed somewhat. And I really do think there is an argument, as you said, that they need a couple of established players. But I think for me, where it's vital is the striker, because they need a striker who scores. They've got a striker who works extremely hard, and he tries to platform other people as much as he can, and he makes life really, really difficult for defenders. But they need a striker who scores. Yeah, they've got Carl Hudlin to offer something different off the bench. They've got Cian Harrott has their sort of young striker in and around the first team squad, but ideally playing most of his football in the B team. They've got Danny Ward as a really good, hard-working option when you want to play a certain way. they haven't got a proper gun striker, and 20 goal a season men are not easy to find. If they were, everybody would have one. But now is kind of the time where they've got to try and get somebody who's going to guarantee them, I don't know, 8 goals minimum, 8 to 10 goals ideally minimum. And it's not easy. It's not easy, but that's the profile they've really got to go and get, because it's just not in the squad at the moment. That's the thing.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, and we'll see. I mean, even recent history, you talked about those loans. Like Joe Hongbo was a good example, and I was just a bit disappointed. I don't know the circumstances, but would have liked to have made him a permanent, because I think he showed something while he was on loan at town. But we'll see, won't we? There's a lot of time between now and January, and I imagine there'll be a lot of talk between now and January, because it feels like everyone's looking forward to that. But yeah, Dave, just coming back to this game, then really, I know we've kind of talked about it, but what is the best way, in your opinion, for Town to approach this match?
Just get on the front foot. They get on the front foot and get on the ball. The Championship is a weird league. You get weird games, you get weird results, you get weird performances, but there kind of is less to fear from Bristol at home than there has been in other games. So, against the second half against Southampton, they were really brave, and that's kind of what they need to be. Just be brave, because with the squad they have and the injury list they have, kind of the only way to be is to try and just conjure up 2 or 3 chances that make the difference. They can't really rely on sort of persistent pressure and building it up. So they've just got to be really, really positive going into it. And the one thing I would say about Darren Moore is, one thing I have been told, and I do believe, is that his persona in press conferences and interviews is very, very different from his persona in the dressing room. He's still quite calm and measured and considered, but talks in a very different way, and has been in dressing rooms all his playing career. He knows what it's all about. And I think, like the second half against Southampton, I think you could see it made a difference in that dressing room. I think the second half against Sunderland, you could see it made a difference in that dressing room. And what was interesting is at the end, Town were pushing for a third, not sitting on the 2-1. So that's why Sunderland couldn't kind of commit to just turning it into the Alamo and pushing everyone forward, because Town were really trying to pick them off on the break. The Swansea performance is different because they were just out on their bums, So I think you just be brave. You just go for it again. Why not? I think, I'm not going to speak for Town fans because I'm not a Town fan. I'm an analyst, but I think what you want to see is if you lose a game 2-1, but they've kind of left everything on the pitch and they've really tried to win and it's just not gone for them. The ball's just not bounced from them on the day. I think you kind of go, well, okay, it's crap, but by the time I've had a pint, I'm absolutely fine about it. Whereas if you don't do that and you do what they did against Hull, it takes about 10 to 12 pints before you're all right with it. And not everyone can drink 10 to 12 pints in a single night.
No, and it's funny because actually, weirdly, Bristol keeps coming up, but a good example of that, where you say 2-1 and left everything, was that Carlos Corberán Bristol City game, where absolutely the XG was like, I swear it was like nearly 5 or something. It was, and like you said, there is. I think that's the thing. There's a way to lose, and you touched on like Darren Moore. The press conference thing for me, like I don't really care. Like obviously, it was great to have Neil Warnock, and it's fun to listen to, but let's be honest, like Carlos Corberán wasn't exactly, he wasn't one who was entertaining in press conferences, but people didn't care because they were winning games. So I do think it's one of them. And I always go back to that clip with Darren Moore after they'd secured that incredible win against Peterborough in the playoff second leg, and just like Barry Bannon talking about like how much he's singling him out for praise and like getting their mentality right. I know it's like can you read too much into that? But it does give me confidence. I think that's the thing. Like I'm not. It might sound like I'm pro Darren Moore, but I suppose coming back to what we talked about earlier, it's really hard to a lot. I want it to work well. Obviously, whoever's in charge of Town, I want them to do the best, and I just feel like he's not had a fair rub of the green really yet.
No, not at all. And I think he's not going to get a fair rub of the green, arguably this season.
No.
Because it's not the work they've got to do in January is the work that they had to do in the summer, and so half the season's already gone, and they've got the same issues. So you can't expect much from this season. And really, it's first day of next season. What that squad looks like is going to be quite interesting, to be honest, because there are a lot of contracts that are up. There are a lot of issues they need to sort. There are a lot of decisions to be made on young players as well. Are you seriously going to take them forward and keep putting the time in them, or do you need somebody with a bit more experience in there? So, yeah, arguably you're not going to see the best until next season, but that's not how football management works. It's like you've got if you're not doing the business after 3 months, regardless of circumstances, it's easier to change a manager than change a squad. And it's quite a brave club that goes, no, we know where the problems are in the squad. We're going to stick on this path. And the Arteta example is an extreme one, but it is a good one. There are other examples you can point to as well. But the Championship is a bear pit. It's an absolute bear pit. But I do understand the reservations. I do completely understand that. It's not like one of the things I said on our podcast that was driving me mad a couple of weeks ago was that I didn't see anything new there since he'd taken over. It was kind of, we're going to keep trying to play a little bit of Warnock ball, and I'm going to, put defenders, I'm going to put players into different roles, but we've seen them in those different roles before. It wasn't like a sort of radical change. It was just reverting them to something they've done before. And now I think after this week, I think we've seen a little bit more of what he wants to do, and he does want to be a little bit braver and a little bit bolder, but he's being held back by what he has available. But I do think there is a proportion of the Town crowd, though, that do just love a personality. David Wagner's press conferences and interviews always went over really, really well. I used to sit there and it used to drive me mad. I mean, if I don't know how often a bloke can tell me that they're a little dog, it honestly used to drive me mad. But I can tell you from the numbers of breeders, etc., Town fans did love it. And then it's been very, very difficult for anyone to kind of replace that. Nobody really warmed to Carlos Corberán. The reason people look back fondly at that time is because they won lots of games.
Yeah.
His press conferences were I mean, they became a bit of a standing joke in some of my WhatsApp groups, because his personality was football manager. There was not much beyond that. And I've said on other podcasts what me and Steve used to do to try and get him going was start talking about tactics, because that was what got him going. That's where you got good stuff from him. If you asked him about transfer rumours or asked him how he was feeling, he just wasn't interested in that sort of thing at all. So I do think personality goes a long way with the Town crowd. And again, that's not criticism. It's just a fact. And I don't think Darren Moore has got that sort of like larger than life persona. Even when the times are good, he's not like that manager who's out there cracking jokes and having a laugh. You look at his time with Sheffield Wednesday and everything else, but he's a very solid professional manager who he kind of wants to do things his way. He's not going to do anything too outlandish. He's not going to like really let you down at any point. So yeah, we'll see, I think is all we can say about it at the minute. We'll see. I'm interested in your take on Nagel's interview though, because one or two of the comments I saw were like, it's all right giving him time, but we could be in the bottom 3 by New Year's Day. So what's your take as Huddersfield Town fan of like, what if you are in the bottom 3 on New Year's Day? Does that suddenly change?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, I would be concerned, to be honest, just because I think if you're, well, you'll know yourself, but if you're, say, I'm not saying Town will be like this, but if you're 19th, I think the players you can maybe bring in, you've probably got a better chance than if you're, I don't know, 22nd, like 23rd. You know, I'm not saying it'd be like that, but yeah, I'd be a bit worried. I think, to be honest, my opinion is kind of with you. I just feel like this isn't necessarily the criticism of anyone, but they messed up the summer transfer window so badly. Like it has to go right, and I just feel like, if we're being honest, and this is no criticism, you know, I don't know Kevin Nagel, I don't know Mark Cartwright or anything, but like I feel like they've unfortunately created themselves a position where they have to get it right. So I think they will get it right, because I don't think there's really an alternative. And yeah, I mean that is a possibility. I look at the teams below Town, and I'm kind of with you. QPR was always the one for me. As soon as they got their manager, I don't think they'll be in the bottom three. I think Wednesday, they look impressive, but when you've got an owner like that, that can completely, you know, it's Jekyll and Hyde, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think Rotherham, a bit like Town have been previously, like they have a low budget, and unfortunately that catches up with you. So same with Plymouth, like Plymouth, you know, although they've played some really good stuff and got good players. So yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it's so strange, because Town really, I think from a neutral's perspective, or, you know, I have friends who are Town, like it's probably quite boring, you know, but actually when you get into the nitty gritty of the club, I feel like they give these like huge, like it has to go right. It has to go right. I mean, the Warnock appointment's a classic example. It's like, we have messed up so badly. This is the only man we can get. And I maintain, and I think most people do, like he was probably the only man who could stop them from going into League One, because they deserve to go into League One. So yeah, I don't know. I think again, Nagel, this isn't a criticism of him, but I think it's just like we've had Phil. You know, Phil famously like said there was talk about Town getting into Europe. I think the Athletic reported that, which is ambitious. You know, Dean was a talker, and you know, got a lot of people on side. And I think the difference, I think, is you know, it's hard to say with those like financial restrictions, but I think Nagel's got a lot more money than them, so I feel like he can back it up a bit more. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. But yeah, I just kind of hope for more, that we're not in the bottom three, because I agree with you and listeners hearing this. Like, it's not his. I don't think that's necessarily him. I think he's just the unfortunate sod who's come after one of Town's like most beloved managers in 30 years. So it's just a hard one.
Yeah, I just think it's quite an interesting situation, because the problems are so obvious.
Yeah.
Right, so obvious. I can tell you now, we're not being geniuses by saying Town need a striker, a winger, an 8, and a right back. That's because it's really, really obvious, and it was obvious in the summer, and it's even more obvious now. So I think for me it's that slight thing of, well, if you bin Darren Moore tomorrow, you're looking at 6 managers in 18 months. You also have to look at it from the manager's point of view of, if you've got somebody who's really promising, really young. So say Liam Manning was really, really promising, and you really, really fancied him to come in. He's going to also look at your club and go, hang on, 6 managers in 18 months. How long am I going to get at this club? Because what happens if I need 4 months? Am I going to get 4 months, or is it going to be 3 months? I'm sorry, but you know, you're gone. So I think there's that side of things, that they have to either stick or get the next one completely 1000% right, which is like huge pressure, because how many times does that happen in football realistically? So I think if they drop into that bottom 3, I think the pressure is different. I think the pressure is real, but I don't think they're a million miles off. I do think these are squad issues. I think if you solve squad issues, they are genuinely not a million miles off from being a lower mid-table team. And the massive thing they've got in their favour is they're still, people would argue they've not had a great season. I think last time I checked, they were 5 points off 14th. And if they were sat in 14th, we'd all be sitting here going, fine.
Yeah.
Absolutely fine. What I mean by that is the margins that they need to kind of turn in their favour are not massive. They're not huge. You know, if you if you won 4 games in the bounce in this league, that's genuinely 4 places in the league, in the right direction. And that is achievable. That is kind of doable. It's big. It's very, very big, but it is doable. So that's why, just rightly or wrongly, I just don't think they're a million miles away. But we come back to it again. It's about that recruitment. They can't afford to get it wrong. To have these problems and still have these problems now, it just makes the pressure worse and worse and worse. It really, really does. So yeah, it's interesting. And the other side of it is, as you'll know, they can't afford a trolley dash on the final day of the transfer window. These really, the first one has kind of got to be done first week, because they need the PR win. They can't be playing their third or fourth game in January and still have most of these holes to fill. So yeah, there's work to be done. Brady.
There is work to be done, and again, this is no criticism, but even the summer, I feel like we needed that. And Chris Maxwell, who's done very well, a second choice free agent goalkeeper, that's not an exciting one. So I'm with you. I wonder if, I almost wonder if a name, like a fairly, not a huge name, because it's Huddersfield Town. It's not like we're going to get the world's greatest defender, Lewis Dunk, as you said earlier. So yeah, it'll be an interesting one, but. Bristol game, what's your score prediction? Because I feel like we've talked a lot about the bigger picture, but
yeah. So Danny Cowley, right? No, I do you know what? Right, like before we did this, I'd kind of talked myself into a 1-1 and kind of talked myself into thinking that's probably be all right. But you know what? I'm going to go 2-1 Town.
Ooh.
I'm going to go 2-1 Town. I just don't think Bristol are brilliant, and I think if Town do the things they've done over the last week and have the ball a little bit more, I think they're capable of winning this.
Nice. I predicted 1-1 for this, so I'm going to go with that. And I don't know who I really see scoring, but I feel like top scorer Mikel Halleck will probably get involved. Absolute machine.
If Town score 2 in a game, then one of the central defenders is definitely getting one of them. That's just what they do.
Yeah, definitely. We did have a lot of mailbag questions, but I think this has been a bit of a long one, so I'll just ask one very quickly. It's about current stuff. A lot were about priorities in January and stuff like that. But Jay Taylor says, with our current squad, this is probably more for you, Dave, assuming all fit, what do you think our best formation is? And if a second question is allowed, what's our best midfield setup? So, Dave, what do you think? It's kind of like not a lot to pick from. I suppose my current squad would be the best players that are available and fit. Probably.
I think probably the 3-4-3 at the moment kind of suits them. But even that, I don't think is an ideal fit for the personnel, because I think depending what your midfield setup is, you can end up with basically a bit of a double pivot in there, which is a bit too negative sometimes if you've got a Hogg and Kasumu there. But I think the 3-4-3 that kind of turns into a 5-4-1 out of possession is sort of suits Town at the moment, because at the moment there are a lot of games that they can't really set up to win. So what do you have to do? You have to make sure you're difficult to beat. You have to try not to lose. And I think that's probably the one that gives them the most stability. And I think that when you've got a back three that are good, but can be turned by pace really, really easily, I think probably being able to collapse into that 5 with 2 quicker players outside is kind of what they need. And the midfield setup, I think at the moment, it's like completely horses for courses. That I don't think Ben Wells is playing in the position he wants to play in or in the style he wants to play in at all. I think Hogg is quietly, I think, in some of the best form I've genuinely seen him in a Town shirt. He has kind of changed his role a little bit, and he is just coming up huge game after game for Town. That everybody knows about kind of what he does really, really well, but there's there's new things he's doing, like, pushing forward and in the press as almost a second striker, and he is a huge player for them. The thing about Kasumu is, like, I think there's a player there, but I've never seen him play a half of football and not get either booked or subbed. And I kind of, like, he's clearly got loads and loads of talent. Like, there are those runs where he takes on 2 or 3 people and he just kind of glides over the turf, and you think, what a player. But as I said, I've never seen him go through 45 minutes and not get booked or subbed. It's one or the other all the time. So I don't know. It's difficult. Romani is not a natural fit in there, my boy. He does. If he plays in that midfield, he has to play a certain way, because that's kind of his limitations, really. And everybody else is kind of a younger option, where it's kind of difficult for me to sit here and make a case when people haven't seen them play and they've got to kind of make that step up into that role. But these are the options they have. This is what it's like at the minute. So I in answer to that, what's your best midfield setup? It is Jonathan Hogg and a new player that you sign in January. that is kind of it, because everybody else at the moment, there's like a sort of asterisk next to their name. But I don't think it's worth saying, I don't think Darren Moore wants to play a 3-4-3. I don't think this is how he wants to play football. It's not how he's set up in the past. I think if he plays a 3-4-3, he wants it to be a much more attacking 3-4-3 than the one we've got. I would suggest that, we're kind of not seeing Darren Moore's football at the moment. We're just seeing the only football that Darren Moore can get out of this team. So it's difficult to answer. Again, it sounds like a bit of a cop-out, that, but I have explained my cop-out.
No, that's it, isn't it? It's really hard to judge, and I think we'll kind of wrap it up there, because, like you say, I think there's a lot of discussion, and I think time will tell, won't it? But yeah, Dave, thanks so much for coming on. And don't forget, you can find Dave and Stephen Chicken at weareterriers.substack.com. It should be in our episode description. Thanks to you all for listening. Thanks to Magic Rock for sponsoring this episode, as always. Tom will be back and we will do a pod together. Has been a while at some point, but that will happen soon, and we'll leave it there. Ta-ta for now, and up the town.